It is a true honor to come here and present to the Japan Society. I appreciate you welcoming Deloitte into your group. It's wonderful. We've actually been involved, and I just learned we were one of the founding members of the Japan Society back in the late 80s and early 90s. And it's wonderful that this organization has been going, helping to bridge our countries across the world. I won't have a big political discussion today, but I would say after the election last week, it is even more important that we have bridges between countries to bring global trade and international competitiveness to the market, particularly for Canada, and I think also very beneficial for Japan, hopefully. So thank you for what you're doing on that, and keep up the good work, because this is going to be even more important as we go into the next 4 years and beyond. So I have a wonderful job to drive innovation at Deloitte. So I have innovation inside our organization here in Canada. We're a 150-year-old organization in Canada. We have over 8,000 people. And when you think about it worldwide, we have over 250,000 people that we have to try and always be innovating, always be thinking about new capabilities so that we can work with our clients in the most efficient way possible and bring the best services to you. A number of you in the room have approached me and talked about your relationship with Deloitte, so I thank you for your business. And we take our business with our clients very seriously. We have many clients that span decades. In fact, we've got some clients that are over 100 years in our working with our organization. So we, like Japanese society, we think about long-term relationships and the impacts. So thank you. If you are a client of ours, thank you. And if you're not, we can talk later about that. So what I'm going to share, I have a great job where I work on innovation inside Deloitte. I have to help put $100 million of bottom line revenue on our books. So it's a lot about fun and interesting stuff and being able to speak with clients. But it's also about creating real new products and new services. I also spend a bunch of my time working with clients to build sustainable innovation programs for them. So how do we actually think about innovation inside their organization so it's not just a buzzword? It's actually something that you embed the science and the as well as the art into your organization. So I have fun with that. The future of Canada research that Ben mentioned, I take very seriously. I was sharing with Ben, one of the leaders in the country, I think, on this topic for a number of decades, actually, is Kevin Lynch. He was in the Privy Council. He's been leading some of the thinking around productivity and innovation and how important it is for Canada and for Canadian society. He came to our partner group in a meeting kind of like this about 6 years ago, and he said one sentence that actually struck us and actually changed how we think about the research that we fund. He said, we are at the first time ever in the history of Canada where if we do not change the trajectory of productivity and innovation, the next generation will have a worse quality of life than we do. So the first time ever in the history of this country that if we don't change how productive and how efficient our companies are and how innovative they are, my kids, I have a 22-year-old son and an 18-year-old daughter, my kids will have, and our kids, our children, or the next generation will have a worse quality of life than we do. That struck us and was a compelling moment of truth or a call to action. So we started doing research around the topic of productivity and innovation. We've done 5 different releases over time, getting into the real root causes of our productivity challenge. Depending on which score you look at, we're rated anywhere from 20th to 27th on global scales for productivity and innovation. Yet we have an amazing country with amazing innovators. So why is that, and we need to fix it? So we've done a number of research programs on it. We've looked at the topic of exports and why do Canadian companies not export. We've looked at the topic of investment. Why do Canadians not put enough money and invest in new technology, in IT technology or in automation? And the most recent one that we did last year was around exponential technologies, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. All of our research is available online. Our goal is to help change the dialogue and hopefully the behavior in the country. So all of it's available online. You can get access to it. What I'm going to go through today is a little bit of the research, a tiny bit, The Age of Disruption report is over a 70-page report. If you're really looking for things to read just before you go to bed, you can read the report. Many, many graphs, many, many charts. I'm not going to go through those today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we found, and then I'm going to jump into the technologies a little bit and hopefully bring to life some of the things and how fast this is changing. I am told that I take my audiences through a little bit of an emotional roller coaster. So you may get a little bit scared by the things that I talk about, and that's okay. With a little bit of luck, I'll hopefully educate and share with you some things that you may not know about. This is a pretty switched on audience, and coming from, with the roots in Japan, you're probably very versed in a lot of the technologies, maybe not all of them, that I'm going to talk about. And hopefully, if I do my job, by the end of the discussion, we get you motivated to actually change a few of the things that you're doing back with your organizations and take some takeaways. So that's the game. You may be a little bit afraid, you may be a little bit educated. Hopefully by the end you're inspired and motivated. We do a lot of work with the World Economic Forum. So these are the guys that run the global program at Davos in Switzerland, where everybody, the leaders in the world, has anybody been to Davos in this group? Okay. So everybody goes to Davos, all the leaders, the political leaders, the corporate leaders, for one main purpose: to take selfies with Justin Trudeau. That's the main, but actually they go to talk about really important, crunchy world problems. And the theme this past year was on a topic called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So let's take a peek at the video that they showed at Davos. So most of us are alive now as we're coming through the late 1900s. This last sentence was the one that caught our attention. So how do we avoid a world of joblessness, low productivity, and social inequality? And there are great things about the technologies and the new business models that I'm going to talk about today, but there are also some challenges. The discussion around technological unemployment, not a new topic as we've looked at these major industrial revolutions. So if you think about going back into history, it feels like this stuff is going pretty fast, right? It's coming at you fast, the 3D printing stuff, the IoT stuff, AI, robotics. It feels fast because it is, right? It is actually going on an exponential curve, and we'll talk about that a bit today. So what do we mean? By the way, a couple notes as we get into this. At the end of the presentation, I will have a slide that gives you access to download the presentation. So in other sessions, there's people furiously taking pictures and notes. Feel free to do that, but I'll also have something that you can download and use for yourselves. I believe the Japan Society is also taking a video to share with their members. So again, it'll be accessible. Some of the stuff goes by pretty fast, and I'm told I talk fast sometimes when I get excited about topics I'm passionate about. If I'm talking too fast, please just put up your hand and ask me to slow down. It's not a problem. You'll have to put up with me a little bit longer if that's the case, though. So here we go. So let's talk about disruption. We like Clayton Christensen's definition of disruption. Clayton Christensen is one of the big authors, Innovator's Dilemma, etc., and he's a Harvard business professor. Here's his definition: process by which a product or service takes root initially in the bottom end of a market and then relentlessly moves up market, ultimately displacing established competitors. So most of the folks in the room are probably in the established competitor zone, right? Big companies that are doing wonderful things. This is kind of scary, right? So let's do a little test. Netflix. 6 years ago, 2010, how many of you had a Netflix account? Anybody in the room? You're okay? If you're an early adopter, oh, there's one very quiet. You see, early adopters, put them in their hand, very shy. Pretty crappy service back then, right? Like, didn't have good content. You were flipping DVDs back and forth. Netflix, big innovation at the time, was no late fees. In our family, with 2 kids and my wife and I, we had this thing called Blockbuster Friday night. Blockbuster Friday night was all 4 of us would go down to the corner Blockbuster, get our little steps in, go to the corner Blockbuster. We would argue where we're going to watch a chick flick, where we're going to watch a drama, what was the latest thing going on, and then we'd pick a couple DVDs and we'd take them home. That was Blockbuster Friday night. Now, let's do the 2016 test. Netflix accounts in you or in your family. Almost everyone. By the way, there's a few people resisting. Oh, those Netflix guys. Resistance is futile. So you might as well get over it. You're going to have a Blockbuster account, or a Netflix account. You're not going to have a Blockbuster account because they went broke. So that's an example where Netflix went bottom end of the market, and then they started saying, hey, new innovation, we're going to stream the videos, right? Next innovation, we're going to actually produce new videos. So House of Cards and other programs that are winning awards. So now the TV studios and the movie studios are saying, who is this Netflix? They seem like they're trying to get into our business, right? So it's a great little example, and you saw here we had a few early adopters, but most of us weren't using it in 2010, and almost all of us are now, and they're wiping out a bunch of industries. So that's the quick lesson on disruption. Now let's get into how fast this is going. So the term unicorn. Do people know the term unicorn? So this is when a company gets to the point of having $1 billion valuation, $1 billion US dollars. So it's getting faster and faster. So if we look at these organizations, Shopify, fantastic Canadian company, Canadian e-commerce company. If you're buying things online, odds are that Shopify is the engine behind it somewhere. In 2004, they made it to $1 billion valuation. That was lightning fast, but it took them 9 years. 9 years. But that was really fast in 2004. Let's keep going. Spotify. Anybody got Spotify accounts? My kids were bankrupting the family with iTunes purchases, so we moved to Spotify because $8 a month, you can get all of the, and it might be $10 now, but you can get all the music you want as long as you're really not passionate about Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, not on Spotify, so that's a bummer. But 6 years it took them to get to $1 billion, right? Let's keep going. Airbnb. How many of you have stayed in an Airbnb? Okay, so here's my to-do for you. You can take homework notes if you want. By next March, I'll give you 5 months. Stay in an Airbnb somewhere. There's Airbnbs everywhere. They're here in Toronto, they're in New York. By the way, here's my little holiday tip, and this one is worth gold. If you go to New York just before the holidays, probably even more expensive now and maybe not as desirable, but if you go to New York before the holidays, it is very expensive. All the hotels crank their prices, right? So Holiday Inn is like $600 in New York. Just once the tree goes up in Rockefeller Center, you can get an Airbnb right near Times Square, beautiful, for $200. So that's my tip for you. These ones aren't in the notes, so you may want to write some of those down. So Airbnb, though, it took them 4 years to get to $1 billion valuation. Let's keep going. Uber. People have used Uber, hopefully, in the crowd. And whether you like the model, don't like the model, and traditional Uber versus Uber X and Uber Pool, et cetera, 2 years to get. And they continue to innovate beyond. Oculus Rift. Has anybody tried on the Oculus Rift? So this is virtual reality goggles. 3 people, 4 people. You gotta try this out. So I have a job on innovation. I thought this stuff was all about gaming. My son is into gaming, so it's like, okay, Oculus Rift, you put on the goggles, and you have what is called a virtual reality experience. You're immersed in the environment, 360 degrees, up, down, every which way. What is amazing with the Oculus, it was created by an 18-year-old gamer who was getting nauseous when he was doing gaming. And so he created a world that was better for him to actually do gaming, sold it to Facebook for $2 billion. Not a $2 billion valuation. He sold it to Facebook for $2 billion. They made it to a $1 billion valuation in under a year. Okay? The interesting thing about virtual reality, and we'll talk a little bit about it later, is it is now being used to train people. If you're going out into the oil patch, you don't necessarily want to fly everybody out to the oil patch to get trained before they go and work on the engines and the different machinery they got. You can put them in a virtual reality environment and actually have them be trained. You can train people that are going to become doctors and nurses in an emergency room on the kinds of things that they're going to see. It can actually be used for philanthropy. So if any of you are on boards of not-for-profits like World Vision and others are actually using it to put people in the situation of the people that they're trying to help. So you want to get money for doctors in Uganda or Kenya, you can actually have a virtual reality experience of what those doctors go through, and when you give them a new bicycle or you give them a kit for medicine, here's the kind of impact. And what we're learning is it's actually an incredibly immersive experience, and people shockingly become more empathetic. They actually share with the experience of the person, so they actually ultimately give more. So interesting experience in Oculus. That was a minor Oculus sales pitch there, and whether it's Oculus or other virtual reality stuff that you look at, it's interesting. So they went to $1 billion in under a year, just at a year. And then finally Slack. Does anybody use Slack in their companies? So this is a collaboration tool. You win the prize. She's had her hand up on almost all these. So Slack is actually a collaboration tool, so you can have virtual teams all over the world, inside your company, outside your company, and they can be sharing, workflow on processes. Slack went from an idea in a basement to a $1 billion valuation in 11 months. So why do I tell you this? And some of the folks that I talk to, especially in the financial services industry, they're very skeptical. They're like, yes, Terry, I've heard this. This was called .com, and this too shall come to pass, and all of these guys are going to be dead. Some of them will, right? Some of them will. However, what they're doing is they're taking advantage of advanced technologies. They're driving business models that are actually making money, and they're changing the game in their industries. So is this just a nice chart that Terry put together of this handful of clients? This is what the chart looks like if you actually show it over time. So the Unicorn Club, these are all companies, and intentionally you can't actually read them all, but these are all companies that over the last 5 years have made it to a $1 billion valuation. Why is that important? It's important because if you get to a $1 billion valuation, that means that you can buy companies, you can borrow money, you can hire top talent, and you can compete in a very different way with the traditional competitors, many of which you are. We are certainly a traditional competitor in the room. So I share that just because the game is changing and people are moving quickly and they're getting access to capital, and they will, some of these names or the companies that they associate with will be impacting the competition in your landscape. All right, so let's get into exponentials, and we're going to talk about this. So I am going to have a little bit of a math lesson for you. So I warn you, it's after lunch, but I'm going to do a little bit of a math lesson. All right, so here's the neuroscience about this. Our brains are trained over decades to think linearly. We understand 5%, 10%, 15% improvements. We get that, right? So the challenge with exponential technologies is at the front end of that curve, it looks linear. 0.01, 0.02, 0.04, 0.08. It looks at the very small levels as linear. So what our brains do is we're looking at this in the market, as we're reading about it in the paper, we extrapolate. Say, yeah, I get that, it's linear. Boop. Here's how fast it is. So if you're running a company, and the CEOs and the CIOs and so on that I deal with, you say, I get it, 3D printing's coming, we got time. We got time, right? It's linear. We'll start thinking maybe about a little research, maybe do a little bit of a strategy. The problem is if it is actually on an exponential curve, that's what it looks like. So if you're the company that's planning your competitive analysis, automating your back office processes on a linear projection, and your competition or the new entrant in your space is doing it on an exponential trend, that's the billion-dollar gap, right? Depending on how big you are. So that's the problem that we have. So now I've teased you with this a little bit. Now let's do a little math quiz. We're coming up on, does anybody know what Sunday is? Sunday. Grey Cup. Come on, you guys. I thought I was going to hear Black Friday, and oh, it's Sunday. Grey Cup, our Canadian Football Championship. So if you go 30 linear steps down the football field, you go 30 yards. This is where the smart aleck in the room says, 30 yards. Yes, you go 30 yards. That was not the quiz. So if you go, however, 30 exponential steps down that football field, 1 step, 2 steps, 4 steps, how far do you go? Don't answer it if you've seen this slide before. How far do you go? Do you get to the end of the football field? People are feeling good about that. Across Canada? That seems like a long way. Across Canada? Okay, who's going to stretch their imaginations a little bit? How far do you go? Shout out some answers. This is the audience participation moment, and you only get a moment, really. Round the world. Round the world. How many people think round the world? We got one. Well, Dave, you said it, and you're not putting your hand up. Come on. So I got two. I got 2 takers for round the world. 2. 26 times around the world. So this is a pretty serious audience. You guys deal with numbers every day, probably. Some of you are in finance, some of you are in other areas. You could not get your heads. And by the way, don't feel bad. Almost every audience I go to, they can't get their head around. By the way, that's 3 times to the moon. 3 times to the moon. So you just experienced that little, okay, I project linear. Terry's asking me the question, so I got to stretch it across Canada. We got 2 brave souls willing to say around the world, but it's actually 26 times around the world. And by the way, the next one, if you go 31 linear steps versus 31 exponential steps, it's, come on, math. This is simple math. You're doubling every time. 52, there we have it. So think about that. Like, I picked 30, but it's a big deal if you can't think about it this way. So all the technologies I'm going to talk about today are actually on an exponential curve of improvement. Okay? So that's why this is so important, because it is going to hit you, your companies, your competition, this fast. All right, so let's get into it. So here's the study that we did last year. We looked at 700 Canadian companies and their preparedness for exponential technologies. We took 5 as part of the research: artificial intelligence and cognitive computing, networks and sensors, and the whole world of IoT, the Internet of Things, advanced manufacturing and 3D printing, collaborative platforms and the notion of crowdsourcing and how do you crowdsource answers and problems, and then advanced robotics. So those were the 5 that we did in the research. You may say, yes, but Terry, there are 7 on the chart. That's true. So since then, we've added 2 that we think are very important: virtual and augmented reality, because of how that is improving and enhancing and changing things, and the blockchain. So those are the ones that we're talking about these days. I'm not going to hit all of these today, but I will bring to life some of them. So here we go. Let's get into it. So AI has been around a long time. I graduated in the 80s from the University of Waterloo. We were doing artificial intelligence in the 80s, but it was on that little slow curve at the front end, right? Improvements, chipping away. All the technical math and computer science guys worked on it, but the rest of us didn't really understand it. So let's talk about Watson. So IBM created one of the big deep machine learning and artificial intelligence engines, and they call it Watson. It's taking that same kind of capability and then applying it to decision making that we see across a wide variety. They're applying it to the law practice. We're at Macmillan, but there are lawyers that are using Watson to actually automate the legal process, right? It's applying it to doctors. So Watson will become a doctor together with some robotic capability. So you're going to see a bunch of that very quickly. So now let's look at Watson as it applies to mergers and acquisitions.
Watson, I need help with acquisitions.
Hello. How can I help you with mergers and acquisitions?
Watson, show me companies with revenue between $25 million and $60 million pertaining to analytics.
Let's see what I can find. I found 87 companies.
Nice.
Okay, so that's a good start. What
That's
do
a
you
good
think, Brian?
start. But I was doing some homework, actually. I think we should pull in that Watson Strategy Group document. There's a lot of key concepts in there. Let's feed it to Watson.
All right. Watson, please regard this as cognitive strategy.
Watson, show me companies with revenue between $15 million and $60 million pertaining to cognitive strategy.
Let's see what I can find.
Yeah, this is
I
nice.
found 112 companies.
Now we're getting a lot in here. And we can see we're getting some connections too, I think.
Watson, show me companies that are about analytics and cognitive strategy that are most similar to the companies named Wolfram Alpha and Kawasaki Robotics.
I found 3 companies similar to the ones you specified.
Beautiful.
Well, let's see what we think of these.
Dive a little deeper. Let's compare these things.
Sure. Watson, show me a decision table.
Here is a decision table that will enable you to compare companies side by side.
Watson, place the companies named Wolfram Alpha and Kawasaki Robotics and Cognalytics and Raytheon BBN Technologies and Decisive Analytics in the decision table.
Okay,
Nice.
Okay, but I think we need a little more than that. We need some other attributes. Watson, place the attributes named revenue and employees and corporate structure in the decision table.
okay.
All right, so now we've got this side-by-side comparison. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Watson, give me a suggestion.
I have a suggestion.
So that was interesting, right? So it's not quite as easy as that, obviously, but you need to actually train Watson and run through a whole bunch of cases. But that is absolutely where the future is going, and that was real-time data, publicly available data that Watson was running. Is it just me, or is it a little weird that Watson sounds less robotic than the 2 IBM guys that are in the session now? So, but you are going to see, whether it's AI and deep machine learning, like what you saw here, you also saw natural language processing, right? So Watson was hearing the words. They weren't typing anything. It was hearing the words and then actually interpreting them and then doing the computer query. I want to get the guys at Watson to figure out how to get that in my car so that my car has much better voice recognition, because I always end up going to the wrong places when I try and use the voice recognition. But you can see where this is going, right? Okay, so as we look at the other side of this, so there's a lot of work around cognitive. So how do we have the machines learning and understanding? And this is a company called IPsoft. They grew up in the space of doing automation for technical IT help desks. So you call in to change your password, like I do on a monthly basis, or whatever it may be. How do they automate that and drive it? They're now doing a bunch of stuff around all kinds of call centers, anything from banks to retailers, et cetera. So let's take a look. This is Amelia. She's the virtual agent for the help desk. So let's see what she's doing.
Unlike other agents, Amelia understands the concepts conveyed within the information she reads and turns it into knowledge as she absorbs it into her semantic memory. Because she does not pattern match words, Amelia understands what you meant, not just what you said when you interact with her, making it possible to have a completely natural dialogue. Using her episodic memory, Amelia grasps the intent of the customer and, drawing on all the experience of previous conversations, is rapidly able to diagnose the person's exact needs. This allows her to help customers even when they begin by asking a very loosely stated question. Amelia doesn't guess when she is asked something she can't answer with certainty. She calls in a human colleague and learns what to do in future by simply observing the conversation.
Please stay online while I contact an agent to help you.
Amelia then dynamically generates new steps in the overall process she is following, and as soon as her supervisor approves these are okay to use, she is ready to handle similar queries on her own. Amelia is already being adopted by large organizations in Europe and the US across a range of roles and, for example, has been trained to manage invoicing queries from suppliers for a global oil and gas company, handle IT service desk queries for a European bank, assist frontline customer service agents for a US media company, and provide policy guidance to mortgage brokers for a global bank. Amelia's unique comprehension and independent decision-making capabilities equip her to fulfill a wider range of knowledge worker roles than any other virtual agent available today. Best of all, Amelia is always available. She holds thousands of conversations in parallel and stays friendly and professional every day of the year, whatever time of day or night you need to contact her.
So another little tip, these are just sideline tips if you want. So I do a fair bit of public speaking. I often test videos and things with my family. I made the mistake of showing this video to my wife, and her quick response was, "Yes, Terry, and why can't you be emotionally engaged?" So, not the point, Leela, really, but nonetheless. So that looks like kind of Star Wars stuff, and maybe the biggest companies in the world are doing it, but Terry, like, is it real? So we're working with 2 of the Canadian banks as we speak on rolling out pilots of Amelia inside their organization, around their call centers, and sorting out how it can actually apply and work hand in glove with the people inside their organization. So real, here now, and starting to impact efficiency. By the way, I think our government, when we look at are we actually being fair in terms of how we treat people calling in? Are we treating them consistently and following the regulations? Amelia is engineered to do exactly that, right? Not to try and sell you a product that's not right for you, not to get into things that you shouldn't be sharing with that organization. So it's very interesting where this is going. But what I like about Amelia is it works hand in glove with the actual call center reps. It's not a instead of or, it's working hand in glove. Now, obviously, it may over time replace a number of them. All right, let's keep going. So blockchain. How many of you are familiar with Bitcoin? Bitcoin, heard about the Bitcoin. Blockchain. How many of you would say you know about blockchain? Okay, still winning the prize. So a couple here, okay. So blockchain is, so Bitcoin, the digital currency that got a lot of traction 4 or 5 years ago. People were thinking about, hey, this is going to change the currency world. It is very interesting in terms of where it's going because it's an unregulated currency and the free market just decides. The interesting thing though, so digital currency, whole separate topic, but the interesting thing is the reason that blockchain is feasible is because of the advances in something called the blockchain. The reason that Bitcoin is feasible is because of the blockchain. So this is, I'll give you my 1-sentence description. This is a distributed ledger. So instead of having one single source of the truth, the source of the truth, the ledger, is distributed to every computer, or all the computers that are connected in to do blockchain mining. So if you want to change the answer or defraud it, you have to get everybody in the network to agree, which is why it's extremely difficult to change. Marc Andreessen was the creator of Netscape, one of the original browsers, and made bazillions of dollars in the early days of the internet. He has said he thinks that this is the most important invention since the internet. So let's just take a peek at this.
Consider value. From bartering to banknotes, the exchange of value has constantly evolved. 20 years ago, the internet revolutionized the world. Now we are at the next stage of its evolution, the internet of value. Things like money, stocks and bonds, intellectual property, music, art, a vote, the deeds to your family home, and even your identity can now be sent across the globe safely, instantly, and without needing a middleman. Blockchain, the technology that will have the greatest impact on the next few decades, has arrived.
So it's interesting. Anything that fundamentally you can capture as a digital asset can be using the blockchain. So emerging decentralized systems. So this is the kind of breadth and depth. So why are we spending time on this? Everything from energy and resources, if you do energy exchange trading, to consumer business. If you're in the consumer business space, loyalty cards, right? So sending people these points, and do you have all your cards and your passwords and your IDs? If you just had all that in the blockchain, you could capture it, you could trade the points if it was allowed, and transfer them, consolidate them. All of those kinds of things can be done. Social benefit delivery, there's a lot of fraud around the world in welfare payments. If you had the blockchain being used to actually say, you're the person you are, you have access to the social benefits, away you go. everything from distributed healthcare records. We think one of the big things is going to be digital identities, and there's going to be a fight over, do the financial services institutions that are trusted, do they own your digital identity? Well, you own it, but do they facilitate it, or does the government facilitate it? So starting to think about that. Automated derivatives and digital currencies, lots and lots of stuff. There are countries around the world where are saying the blockchain is going to be the only place that we put land title. So the record that I own my particular piece of property, the source of record is going to be the blockchain. They've had a lot of fraud, and this way they can bypass the fraud and actually in a much more cost-effective way manage it. So very interesting, and it's not, a lot of people when they go Bitcoin blockchain, they quickly go, oh yeah, that's the financial services guys, they have to worry about that. This is going to impact a very wide variety of industries. All right, let's keep going. Why do you care? So financial institutions, trust is a big deal, and they need to worry about it. Fundamentally, we're changing a number of the business models. I'm not going to get into it today, but there's an example where if you want to publish music online, you're an artist and you've got new music and you don't want to go to one of the record labels, you can put your music available online via the blockchain, and you can decide, students, if you can show a student ID, you can download it free and use it. Other people, they can download it once and they can trade it. You can set the rules. You can set the prices. All of that can be governed within the blockchain. So very interesting. And it's got a lot of operational efficiency. The reason the banks are really both fearful and excited about this is they make a lot of money when we take Canadians and we send money to Africa, to China, to Japan, to other places. The banks make a lot of money on the exchange and working on the float. And not a lot of people have disrupted that. If you go to the blockchain and you do it via this, it's a seamless transaction. Instead of going through SWIFT, it is cents on the dollar compared to what the customers are paying. So it has the potential of disrupting a very significant source of revenue for the financial institutions. So that's why they're spending time with us and looking at this. All right, so let's get into, by the way, there's a lot of stuff that we have online that you can read more about the blockchain. Don Tapscott here in Toronto and his son Alex just wrote a book on the blockchain economy, and it's worth taking a peek at that. It's very approachable. Networks and sensors. So this whole world of the Internet of Things. So there's a company out of Waterloo called Blue Rover. Has anybody heard of Blue Rover? Probably not. You two over here? No? Okay. So we got you guys even on one thing at least. Okay, so Blue Rover is an Internet of Things company. So they manufacture sensors that can track anything from heat to humidity to moisture to sanitary conditions like presence or absence of bacteria to viscosity to vibration, all kinds of things. Okay? So they manufacture them, then they actually pull them together through a common module, and then they provide dashboards to people. So let's take a peek at Blue Rover in terms of one of the examples here. So this is a greenhouse, so we're measuring, the sensors are measuring all the moisture in each of the plants, and they're collecting that into the central hub, and then they're providing that data back to this little iPad that she's got here. So she can understand what the moisture is in each of them, and they can personally adjust the moisture. She looks pretty happy, but she doesn't realize her job's disappearing. So moisture levels, so much more efficient in the greenhouse, right? You can adjust it and adapt it. Food and health safety is all about, are the fridges cold enough, are the ovens hot enough, and do you have sanitary conditions, all of which can be measured in the organization. Boston Pizza put this solution with Blue Rover in 50 of their restaurants, and they're looking at rolling it out worldwide. When you think about food safety, it's all about actually starting all the way at the farm, so farm to fork. So what happens in the transport trucks? So this is measuring the temperature and the humidity. This guy, I'm not sure what he's doing. Oh, he is the universal bad guy. He's got a black hat and a hoodie, so he's a bad guy. And meanwhile, it's being monitored for safety and security, and he's having his picture taken. I love this guy, sitting in his undershirt at home. He's the security guy going, yeah, police have been called, I'm good. His job's going away for sure. So those are actually real examples of Blue Rover implementations, okay? Canadian company based in Kitchener-Waterloo at Communitech doing this to help enhance supply chains. They've done it in the food and health services, in the food safety. They've done it in healthcare. They're doing it in transportation with folks like CN Rail. So if your organization isn't thinking about logistics and monitoring logistics, whether it's from a safety perspective or an efficiency perspective, or just a flow through of customer needs, you need to be thinking about this kind of technology, and whether it's Blue Rover or somebody else. All right, so let's look at, so that was kind of interesting. Now let's look at the industrial level of IoT. So this is General Electric. General Electric, before this goes, about 5 years ago, in 2011, said, we see this Internet of Things happening. We're getting out of being the big guys in terms of engines and turbines and all of that kind of stuff. We want to create integrated supply chains that are instrumented and can measure. And so part of what we're going to do is we're going to be a big data and analytics company, not just a large industrial manufacturing company. So this is their take on the industrial Internet of Things.
To you, this looks like the production of oil and gas in an ordinary well field. To GE, this is a collection of brilliant machines providing continuous monitoring and control of pressures, temperatures, flow rates, and other critical production characteristics, ensuring the safe, efficient flow of oil and gas out of a well. For example, if a large weather pattern develops, even over a small percentage of the field, it creates the potential for well damage that leads to lost productivity, increased safety risks, and lower profitability. But since we can monitor and analyze your equipment and sensors with real-time data, you can prioritize deployment toward top-producing wells if communication goes down, predict equipment failure before it happens with early warnings, and help optimize your wellhead control and performance with utmost equipment reliability, all without compromising human, environmental, and equipment safety and performance.
So you can start to see that it's being deployed. They actually spent just shy of $1 billion converting their company to a much bigger data and Internet of Things kind of company. And that's how they're competing with whether it's IBM or SAP or other kind of players. So they're not just the hardware guys, they're also the services folks. So reinventing their business. All right, so robotics. Robotics is interesting, and Japan is obviously one of the top countries in the world that really pioneered robotics. I always thought of robotics like the car manufacturers, some of which are here in the room or represented in the room. You know, pick up the windshield, put it on the car, pick up the windshield, put it on the car, right? So very big machines, single-purpose type of machines, etc. So now robotics is becoming much more commonplace in terms of the kinds of applications. So let's look at Navi. Navi is actually a fully autonomous inventory and customer service solution for retail stores. But it's a robot, right? So what happened was Lowe's. So Lowe's in the U.S., this is one of the organizations that sells home improvement stuff. So all the lumber, all the stuff. So it's kind of like Home Depot or Rona here. So they created an innovation lab organization inside Lowe's to say, how do we fundamentally transform what is a basic retail organization? They started looking and they said, okay, we created our lab. They were working with Singularity University, which is a think tank down in Palo Alto, and together with us. They said, let's do some low-tech kind of idea brainstorming. So they had a graphic illustrator say, well, what could an experience really look like? Well, what if I came into the store, I couldn't find, inevitably I'm looking for something that I can't find and it's not up on those big signs. What if I was able to talk to a little robot that actually told me where to go find stuff, took me maybe even to the place, and actually helped me through the journey. So that seemed like it was interesting. They'd interviewed their customers and tested that this might be something they'd be interested in. They went to a lot of world-class organizations to bring them in as part of the example. So they used, in this instance, HoloLabs. They used Singularity in their labs to test stuff out. And you can see a number of the organizations that were part of this. And they came up with something called the Lobot. The Lobot was released last month in their stores, and here's what it looks like.
Hi, I'm looking for some paint.
Need to find something? Lobot can show you, and in multiple languages. Lobot also helps our team by constantly monitoring inventory, giving us daily feedback about what is in stock in the store. All of this allows our staff to focus on what they do best, helping you.
Lab concept to in the stores, just shy of 9 months. That's the pace that this kind of stuff is going. I gave you a Lowe's example. There's an example that we're working on with some Canadian retailers of which you would recognize the names that are doing exactly the same thing, different technology underneath the covers. They're actually looking at how do I bring that robot in to help me. If you're in a grocery store, one of the big challenges is if I put a promotion on in the morning and it gets sold out, the only way they know historically if it's sold out is as the store closes at night, they go do an inventory check. So they don't realize that, cornflake cereal that we put on promotion this morning has run out. Well, what if you learned that, it's wiped out by 11 o'clock, but I've got some back in the warehouse, I can bring it out. We can sell more. So real-time information is a big, big deal. So that's where robots are now being applied to retail and many, many other industries. And you can start to see that robot, like they're not going to put them in their stores if it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. That robot is under $10,000, right? So you start to understand like, wow, if people can come into my store, they can get what they need, get out quickly, get other things. Very different experience. All right, so autonomous cars. So this one is a little bit of a volatile discussion in some of the corners, but autonomous cars are coming. That is the Google self-driving car from 3 years ago, right? That you see in the center of that lane with all of the other traffic around it. What makes this interesting to us is it's not just about car manufacturing. It actually has significant implications to insurance, to infrastructure, to parking, to real estate, all of them. These are the official dates from some of the car manufacturers. I don't have all the car manufacturers, and you see a conspicuous one there, Apple, who hasn't stated, and yet they're working on things in the back room. So lots of interesting things from this, and I'm not sure, like you see, Uber 2030, they're already doing a pilot in Pittsburgh. Like, what's up with that? So lots of things going there. So let's take a look at what this looks like, one vision of the future.
Many of our customers, particularly those in dense urban areas, understand the difficulty in finding a legal parking spot. An over-the-air software update will be going out to vehicles that allow Model S to automatically detect the presence of a meter maid or law enforcement officer. If Model S detects an imminent ticket, it will deploy countermeasures to deter the ticket writer from issuing the ticket. The windshield wipers and washers will be activated, deterring the ticket writer.
They have to be really slow policemen.
In the event that the ticket issuer persists, Model S will enter ticket avoidance mode. In ticket avoidance mode, the vehicle will autonomously drive in circles around the block until the ticket issuing threat is no longer detected. If the threat of a ticket has passed, the vehicle will park in its original parking spot. Otherwise, it will continue to drive around the block. A message will be pushed via the mobile app, alerting the user that ticket avoidance mode has been activated and Model S is on the move. The autonomous driving summon feature will automatically be activated in ticket avoidance mode, and Model S will come and pick you up. With parking ticket deterrence and ticket avoidance mode, Model S has you covered. Long forgotten will be the days of parking tickets, or as we like to call them, receipts for premium parking.
So I kind of like that one. It's sort of fun, right? So Tesla released that video April 1st of 2015. All of the technology that you saw was available in their labs at the time, but it wasn't on their commercially available cars, right? So it was not a fake video, but it wasn't commercially available vehicles. So that was kind of fun. So let's take a look, and I will apologize. This next video is a little bit long, but it gives you a real sense of the state of the nation of autonomous driving today as we speak. This was released 2 weeks ago by Tesla. I like it mostly because of the music. So he's not touching the wheel or the pedal. So I like this. He gets out of the car, the door shuts itself. There's nobody actually in the car now. So I like this part. The parking, the guy is actually parked. You see how the back car is actually over the line? How many of you tried to park to figure out if you got enough room to get it in there in the parking spot? So it's measuring that as it goes by and figuring out before it decides to park in that spot that it's actually got enough space. And then it parks. So that's actually production ready car today. So I'm not here to sell you Teslas, but I am here to say that autonomous vehicles are coming. Yes, the lawyers will have a field day and there will be insurance challenges and all kinds of other discussion, but the technology is here. Many of the other companies, whether it's Mercedes and some of the Japanese manufacturers, are all bringing this kind of capability out. There are 1.3 million people per year that get killed in car accidents because humans are actually causing problems. So this has a significant opportunity, and yes, it'll come with its own challenges and so on. There's been a little bit of press on, one or two of the accidents that have happened, and it's literally one or two of the accidents. So this is going to change a whole bunch of industries, and it's here today. It's not, when I first started this discussion 2 years ago, people were talking about 2030. 2020 is kind of the latest date that people are talking about now. So in a span of 2 years, we've enhanced a decade in that discussion. That's why this is so important. Impacts all over the place. This is a solar panel to charge GM's cars. So their Leaf thing, because you need to charge if you're driving electric cars. So the question is, is parking going to be all about the solar panels and where do you get your solar panel? Or are they going to charge up in stations and you actually don't need to park them? They just go and re-energize themselves. So all those parking lots that we've built may not even be needed, right? Or we'll need them outside of the downtown core, outside of areas, because they'll go and they'll come back to us. They know that I drive from 7 in the morning to 8 or 9 at night, not overnight. I'm not a late night owl, so it can use my car for other things at night. Very different model of how we think about this. The challenge with all of the electric car space, I'm a big guy on we need to be thinking about how we save the environment and how we drive some of that, so electric cars are a good thing from my perspective. The challenge is still all about the battery storage and all of the energy discussion. We can have solar, we can have all kinds of things that capture the energy. It's about the battery storage. So why am I showing you a MacBook Air? This is what the inside of a MacBook Air looks like. It is all battery, actually. Right? There's this little processor that does all the computing, but the entire base of the MacBook Air is all about battery. So that's going to be the next generation of some of the innovation that we see, is how do we actually have the batteries keep up with the actual level of energy production. Tricorder X Prize. So any of you Star Trek fans, right? So this is, you're allowed to actually be proud to be a Star Trek fan. So this is the tricorder. So he's using it to actually scan the patient, right? And so handheld device, scanning the patient to say, okay, here's what you got, and then also actually helping to solve them. So there's a thing called X Prize, created by Peter Diamandis. In the X Prize, they said, we're going to go solve big problems of humanity. And so they said, if we can, Qualcomm said, we will give you $10 million if you can solve doing 85% of what a doctor can do with a handheld device that is under $1,000. That was the prize. And they're very specific when we say 85%. Like you got to take blood, you got to do blood pressure, you got to do all kinds of things that you typically go to your doctor to do. Okay? Started 3 years ago. There were over 40 teams and organizations that were driving it through. It's now down to 6 teams. One of the teams is called Cloud DX. It's from Hamilton, Burlington actually. And these guys are amazing. Sunny Khalil, who's the CEO, is an amazing Canadian. He goes down to Haiti every year to do relief work down in Haiti. And he got frustrated because he couldn't serve enough people because he didn't have the right technology there. And so he had started to work on mobile technology that he could work more patients and get much more efficient work out of the time that he had. This is what their program looks like. At the bottom, you can see there's a thing that looks like a set of headphones. They took some of the best design labs and combined them with the doctors, and that lab actually goes over your shoulder, measures a bunch of your heart rate, things so that the nodes actually sit on just below your shoulder blades, and it can do continuous monitoring of blood pressure, heart rate, O2. They use an earpiece to actually track your temperature internally. So all kinds of stuff built in that. He thinks, and this is publicly available information, he's done TEDx presentations, etc. We have his devices in our discovery zone at our greenhouse up at Yonge and Adelaide, which you should go to if you have a chance. But he thinks he'll be able to release that next summer for under $300. 85% of what a doctor can do, available for $300, hooked into an iPhone or an Android device, and who knows, maybe even BlackBerry. So that's the pace that this is going to fundamentally change how we get access to medical services in remote Aboriginal communities, in rural Canada, etc. Fundamentally able to change what happens in healthcare because sensors, networks, and it's called Cloud DX because all of the analytics, he's using in essence Watson behind up in the cloud. So the sensors are to capture all those little devices, by the way, take little blood samples. So you take a little blood sample, just literally a pinprick, and each of those are for different measurement of different things, cholesterol, HDL, et cetera, et cetera. So all of the real guts of what makes this magical is in the cloud. So it's actually running all the algorithms, looking at all the data, taking all the analysis. All he's done is create a device that can capture that. Okay? Coming soon to healthcare near you. Okay, so what does this mean to you? We're in the final sprint here, kids. So here's what we think about this. This is really important to Canada because we are a risk-averse nation. When we did our first study, we did 900 companies in Canada, 900 companies in the US, and the companies in Canada said they scored themselves every bit the same as their US competitors on risk appetite. We said, that doesn't really feel right as we sit here and we travel to the US. So let's actually we stopped our research. We said, let's go actually measure what they're doing. So we created a risk behavior index of how much are they spending on R&D, how many patents are they creating, how much merger and acquisition activity are they having, do they have any failures in their org, and we dropped 35 points. So Canadians are risk averse and we need to fix that. We have fewer high growth mature firms in Canada than the US. We are amazing at creating startups. We do not have a startup problem. We are 25% more prolific at creating startups than the US. The problem is we don't keep them going and have them be scale-ups and ultimately large corporations. They either get bought out, they become lifestyle companies where they're like, I never thought I'd have a $50 million company. I got a cottage at Whistler, I'm good to go, right? So all of those things happen. And naively, we invest significantly under the average for our industry. So we need to fix that. As you look at our research, here's what happened. We said, if you're going to be highly prepared, you have to have three things. Self-reported, by the way, by the CEOs. You have to know what the technologies are and say you know them, so AI, robotics, etc. You have to say you have a strategy for them, and you have to say that you're investing. So we lowered the bar. We didn't actually test if they're really doing it, etc. Only 13% of the organizations that filled it out, 700 of them, actually met the highly prepared bar. So pretty low bar, and only 13% of them let. Many of you in the room will be in that highly prepared. You'll have projects going on inside your company doing the things in the highly prepared category. The problem for you is that many of your clients, a third of the country, are in totally unprepared. Haven't heard of the technology, don't have a strategy for it, and I'm actually not investing in it. So even if you're in the highly prepared, the problem you have is you're selling to and trying to work with and have alliances with organizations that are totally unprepared. So that's the dilemma for the country that we need to change. So here's what we've seen. So 3 years ago, we bought the Monitor Group. It's a big management consultancy around strategy. And so we've studied innovation. One of the organizations within Monitor is called Doblin. We've been focused on innovation for 30 years. Jay Doblin created his consultancy 30 years ago. And here's the things. We look at observable events, but you need to think about the patterns and the trends and ultimately the system dynamics underneath. When we looked at our research, there's 4 important principles. You have to be explicit about what you want to do with innovation. So some of the companies that we work with say, I want to transform the industry. And that's great. That's a very laudable, it's a risky goal, but it's a very laudable goal. But when you look at their investments, they're all investing in core innovation. So faster, better, cheaper inside my existing products, my existing markets. So you have to be explicit. What are you trying to do, and does your actual investment portfolio line up with your objectives? You need to think beyond product innovation. I'll talk to you about 10 types of innovation in a second. But we've done a lot of research, and we disseminated, because people talk about innovation, they talk about iPods and iPhones, and often people look at Apple as the example. But it's not just about product when we talk about innovation. A lot of it is about business model, network, structure, process, or the stuff that we're seeing now, customer experience. How do we actually innovate on the customer experience? So think beyond product innovation. You have to use design thinking. Are people familiar with design thinking as a concept? No, not many. There's a couple of head nods. So design thinking, go and read about it. It's being taught in the MBA schools now. If you are in the business of building new products, building new services, you need to understand design thinking. At its simplest level, when we design products historically, we look at the feasibility. Can we actually technically build it? We get the engineers to look at stuff. Can we technically build what we want to build? Then the finance guys come in and say viability. Can we sell it for money that we can make a profit? The problem with that is you've forgotten about the customer and the actual end user. So design thinking is all about user-centered design, going out, using people that have names like ethnographic researchers, psychological behavioral analysts. So going out and understanding what are the actual needs of the customer, and then designing for feasibility and viability. So desirability first, and then feasibility and viability. So really important on that. And thinking about extreme users is where deep and unconventional insights come from. We believe innovation is a discipline, and there's a whole method and that you can go at. I'm sensitive to time. This is the matrix, and it's a pretty simple one. But here's how we think about innovation ambition. So products and assets are the things that you sell on the bottom. And as you go up the y-axis, that's markets and customers. If you're selling something and you're doing an innovation project for existing markets and existing products, that's core innovation, right? Faster, better, cheaper. Still a good thing to do. If you're getting into a new market or a new set of products, but for existing customers, that's adjacencies, okay? That middle gray zone. And then finally, if you're fundamentally new markets, new products, et cetera, that's transformative. And you can see there's some examples of where you go with that. And the Nabisco one is great. This is an example where they took the candy bar market and said, we actually make chocolate today and we make bars, but everybody's on this diet trend and they all want 100-calorie kind of stuff, and they don't seem to have the discipline to be able to open the chocolate bar, cut it in half, and only eat the first half, right? Nobody can do it. Nobody can do it. So they said, what if we just take exactly what we make today, sell it to exactly the people we sell today, but we put it in a 100-calorie bar? Took over the market. Sold crazy amounts. Swiffer, same kind of example, except they got into new markets, and they said, there's some people that we really don't think are addressed enough. Senior citizens and students. Students, really messy, but their parents want them to be tidier, and they actually, underneath the covers, would like to be a little bit tighter. And senior citizens don't like getting up and down and doing all this stuff. What if we actually create a product that has our cleaning goods, but put it on a bar and replace it with kind of a sweeping mop sort of thing that you can replace and you can sell some of the products? Fundamentally took over by looking at the extreme ends of the continuum. So look beyond product innovation. When we studied the biggest and the best innovators in the world, and we spent 2 years doing the analysis and studying the ones that were most successful, everybody talks about product and product system. But here's what we're seeing now, much more bolder concepts: profit model, network, structure, and process. So if you look at Airbnb, if you look at Uber, if you look at Netflix, if you look at Apple and iTunes and so on, they are all about configuration innovation. Everything from the profit model to the network that they're connecting into. And then if you look at beyond that, I argue that in today's day and age where we're so stressed for time, we're so frustrated with poor customer service and customer experience, companies will be differentiating themselves fundamentally on innovation within the customer experience level. So service or channel or brand or customer engagement. Why is Apple so good? It's not just because they do interesting stuff in the offering, but they have a different profit model. They have a different network structure. They have iTunes and Apple Music and all the stuff on that side of the equation. When you go into a store, the structure of the store and the way you experience it is different. When you go in and you're trying to get engaged, they have Genius Bar. What is the Genius Bar? Have a bunch of people who are really bright give you tutorials on how to use and buy more products, right? It's a brilliant customer engagement model. So they do almost everything across this. So the reason people are having so much trouble competing with them is because it's not just about product. It's not just about the latest cool smartphone. It's the whole continuum that they look at. Here are some examples. By the way, we did this other radical thing. We took all of our research on the 10 types and we published a book. And we are, if nothing else, very clear and to the point. So the book, shockingly, is called The 10 Types of Innovation. So available at Amazon near you. But so we've taken all of our research and just made it available because we think that's what we need to do. So all of these examples are there. What we also found is the companies that did 4, 5, 6 types or 8, 9 types made way more, they had way higher shareholder value on the S&P 500 than the ones that just tried to pick off 1 or 2, because 1 or 2 can be replicated. Okay? Ecosystems, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but it is really important that you get outside of your own organizations and connect in with ecosystems and incubators. So in Canada, there's a lot right here in town. We got Mars, we got the Digital Media Zone 111. If you go down to Kitchener-Waterloo, which if any of you have not been to Kitchener-Waterloo, you should go check it out. There's some amazing innovation going on there. Communitech is one of the hubs that's been going for 15 years now. They have spawned over 1,000 companies. Companies like, anybody use Dropbox? Dropbox came out of Communitech, right? Shopify came out of Communitech. Pebble watches used to be cool before the Apple guys came along. Pebble watches came out of Communitech. Anyway, lots of cool stuff there. You also need to look at the various groups across the world, and there's some that are in Japan, whether it's Morning Pitch or Nomura. There's a bunch of different sites. You need to get out and understand what's going on, figure out which ones your company should have a presence at. These are some of the questions, hopefully, that we got you thinking a little bit about. Are we prepared? How do we build a sustained innovation engine? Are there specific technologies? I covered a lot of stuff. Some of these will not be relevant to your organization, and that's cool, but think about those. And I will, again, we're going to give you this as a takeaway, but go in, if you're interested in keeping up with this stuff, we create a little blog online. It's free, exponentials.xyz. Musical fans will appreciate. I wanted it to be called exponentials.yyz, but apparently that wasn't feasible. Salim Ismail from Singularity wrote a book on exponential organizations. So less about the technologies, more about the organizations. And you can see some of the research. We've done amazing research with the World Economic Forum on the future of financial services, if you want to see that. I find with my kids, I can give them all the articles I want to give them, but they want to watch movies and they want to watch YouTube. So what we've done is take a whole bunch of videos that we have found that are tackling whether it's robotics, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's cyber. There's a whole bunch of cool movies that you'll see in when you download this. And a bunch of these, including, has anybody watched Westworld, the new one that's out? Pretty wicked show. A little scary, but pretty wicked. So in Westworld, the really rich people can take a vacation to this wild, wild west community. They go and it's really recreating the Wild West, but everybody in the Wild West is actually a robot. And the robots start to actually think, they start to have decisions, they start to veer away from the stories that they've been scripted for. So there's some watching, and here's your, what I call the constructive disruptor. So how do you disrupt your own organization in a constructive manner? Here's the experience roadmap. Please try these things if you can. Get a personal drone, understand where the drones are going. They're not very expensive. Muck around with it. You can do some cool stuff. If you have not driven in an autonomous vehicle or in an automatic vehicle, go schedule a test drive. You can go to Yorkdale and actually just schedule a test drive, 30 minutes. And because everybody watched the video, go, oh yeah, but that's their promotional video, like come on. Go schedule a test drive and you will realize how fast the technology is coming. If you're looking for Christmas gifts for kids, any of the VR headsets are going to be hot this year. By the way, I don't get any promotions for any of these offerings. Nest thermostats is Internet of Things applied to yourself. We go to our cottage, and my wife always complains because it's 2 hours north of here. We always get there and it's freezing cold because I'm Scottish by background. I like to turn down the temperature until we're there. And it's 60 degrees or 58 degrees Fahrenheit when we get there. You now can have a Nest thermostat. You say, hey, I'm coming. Bring it up to 68 or 70 by the time I get there. No brainer. Doesn't cost you anything. Watson, you can go and take any of your topics and say, Watson, I'm interested in happiness. I spent a lot of time last week on this topic. I'm interested in happiness, Watson. How can I make myself happier? It will curate all of the TED videos, TED.com videos, and give you an 18-minute segment where you can look at all the different ones that you want to go and watch. So kind of fun. This is the call to action for Canada. So we did our latest research on courage, and Canadian organizations need to have more courage, especially in the world that we're heading into. So too often we look for somebody else to drive the difficult choices and make the choices, and we'll follow them. We need to lead. Too often we shy away from the key investments. Well, that's next year. We're having a tough year. We can't make those investments this year. We're having a tough year on P&L. We have to make investments for the future. We don't accept the short-term challenges. Well, is it going to have an ROI this year? I'm not going to invest in anything that doesn't have ROI this year. Maybe it takes 2 years or 5 years. We need to make those kind of choices for our country and for our organizations. And ultimately, it's the courage of the individuals, you in the room that are leading some big organizations, that make the difference. And the courage to do it, and you're already demonstrating a ton of this, but the courage to do it across geographies is really also important. I am at the end. This is my ecosystem. So I will leave with you one thought, and here's the Age of Disruption, and you can download the site. But I will thank you again for the honor, and I'm hoping I'm using this term correctly, but for me this is the phrase that I think is correct, and we'll see if it is, but ichigo, ichi-e. So sharing a moment together. Hopefully we have a chance to do it again. But this has been a special honor for us, and I thank you for your time.